Then, of course, the Vikings retire. You're number 10 as well.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about your trade to the Giants. You like you said, you played with the Vikings. You're traded to the Giants in '67. You go back to the Vikings in '71. Kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I got traded to the Giants, and the Giants. This was, they had finished last in the league. They were 1 win, 12 losses, and 1 tie in '66, and that's with Earl Morrall at quarterback, who later was to be the MVP, playing for the Baltimore Colts, and went to that famous Super Bowl against the Jets, and then he was the MVP playing for the Dolphins in their undefeated season. And he played there. They were 1 win, 12 losses, and 1 tie. The Giants had the number 1 draft choice for the worst record. The NFL gave them a number 1 draft choice because of the merger of the leagues, and the Jets were there. So what they did, they gave up 3 number 1 draft choices for me, and 2 number 2 draft choices. And I went to New York to play, and I was in New York in my peak years, and I had my best years in New York, quite frankly, but nobody knows it. But because we didn't have great players, but we went 7-7 from 1-12-1 with the same players and no draft choices. And I thought that I did a better job of helping my team than I ever had in my career. And I think I did that in New York. The next year we were 9-5. And we didn't have anywhere near the talent that we had in Minnesota. Quarterbacks, if you're going to be a great quarterback, you've got to have great talent around you. And I played on expansion teams, and we played the Giants for 5 years. And I didn't have that in the peak of my career, my first 11 years. When I went back to Minnesota, we had great talent. We had the Purple People Eaters. We had Chuck Foreman. Ahmad Rashad came in. We had great talent. We had great coaching in Bud Grant. We had a stable organization, and we were able to win, even in the latter parts of my career. My first Super Bowl, I was 34 years old. My last one, I was 37. So you're back then was when quarterbacks actually got hit, and they didn't have all the rules that if you touch him with a feather that you get a 15-yard penalty. It was rock and sock 'em for the quarterback. There was no protection at all for him.
You go. You finish your career, you go into television, you do some things there. Now, one of my producers asked me that, I'm not going to ask you about your show. That's incredible. Do we want to talk about your work there?
It was pretty interesting. I'm a serial entrepreneur. All the time I'm playing football, I'm building companies. I built 15 companies. But when I retire, I really am spending most of my time in business. But I do 2 gigs. I do Monday Night Football with Howard Cosell and Gifford and Meredith. And then on Monday night for 5 years, primetime ABC, I did That's Incredible with John Davis and the Kathy Lee Crosby. And I had a good time doing it. It was a fun show. We had a lot of crazy things on the show, but some of the interesting things on the show. I had Muhammad Ali on the show. We had Tiger Woods hitting golf balls on the show when he was 3 years old. I had him sitting on my knee talking to him. And who would have thought? Who would have thought that Tiger Woods was going to, end up being what he has become? And so it was a kind of a fun, interesting show, and I did that for 5 years. But I didn't really want to continue any television work because I'm really a business person. In this time of recession, depression, financial meltdown, I've started one more company. We've hired more people in the last 12 months. And our revenues are up, and I think that if you operate your businesses well, the good operators have a great advantage in down times like this, because in good times a lot of people can be successful, but in tough times only the real good operators can be successful. And I run my businesses with my hands in the soil. We don't bring consultants in. Can you imagine that you bring a consultant to tell you how to do your work? You got to figure it out yourself. You guys have to figure out how to do your work, and no consultant can come in and tell you. And that's the way you run a business. You got to work hard, and you got to put your hands in the soil and figure it out yourself. And that's what I've done all my life. My motor runs 100 miles an hour from the time I get up to the time I go to bed, and even while I'm sleeping, I'm thinking. I'm 69 years old, and I love work. I love being productive. I live a purposeful life, and And I learned the basic fundamentals in football, but the fundamentals was this. In football, my goal and my mission was to make my teammates better. So that's what it was about. If I could make my teammates better, we had a better chance of winning. I had to get rid of selfish me. And that's the same way in business. It's about making my business partners, making my customers better. And I really think the key to the key to happiness in life and production in life is relationships. Relationships that come from trust, and trust comes from caring. And that defines me in the book. Every Day is Game Day is an appropriate title for my book because it's not a football book. It's a book about my life, which has had tremendous, experiences in football, winning, losing, dealing with all that in business, ups and downs of that. And all my learning has come from other people and from things I read. And I put those fundamentals out there. I tell the stories, a lot of stories, every one of them absolutely true. We didn't have to enhance anything, but it's a book that I've had people come back and say, I read it in 2 days. I cried in reading the book, and I laughed in reading the book, and that's what it's done. And I didn't think this book would do very well. I've been out of football for 31 years. We've knocked the cover off the ball because the book is I think motivational, is inspirational, but it's got it's real life experiences that maybe somebody else can learn from my life experiences as I've learned from other people's life experiences, and that's why it's been fun to do the book.
Of course, the author in that book was Jim Bruton, a former NFL player as well. Some of the things that the book reveals for the first time, you talk a little bit about that 75 playoff game against the Cowboys.
I start off with that story, and the interesting thing of that story, as I'm doing the book, I call Roger Staubach, my best friend in football. I never mentioned this game to him in any conversation we'd ever had, and we had the conversation, and I relay the conversation on in the book, and I also tell in the book the critical moment was not the Hail Mary pass that Staubach threw to Drew Pearson. This critical thing was we had with about 2 minutes left. We had the ball on the line, our own 40 or 45, a 3rd and 3. And Dallas called their last timeout. It was a cold, wintry day in Bloomington, Minnesota. And I came to the sideline, and Jerry Burns, my offense coach, thought we should run it with Chuck Foreman, and we had run it well all day. And I thought we had a little rollout pass that had been successful for us all my career. And he went with me, and I wanted to do the rollout pass, and it didn't work. And it was my failure. It was my responsibility to make that work. It was my responsibility to have the right play. And I didn't either have the right play or didn't make it work. And that's what haunts me is I could have put the game in my control, and we never would have had to worry about Roger hitting Drew Pearson on the Hail Mary pass.
A couple of the highlights of the book is you talk about your personal tragedy after that 75 game. Your love for New York City and what it meant for you to play for the New York Giants. Why it's hard for you to go back to the Twin Cities. That ought to be interesting. I want to fast forward a little bit to today's version of the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, they're playing well under quarterback Brett Favre. But personally, I think defensive front line have a lot to do with it. I'm a big Jared Allen fan. Give me your thoughts on Brett Favre coming back out of retirement and the Vikings as a whole.
Yeah, I made it very plain 3 months ago that I didn't like anything about that. From Minnesota's side or from Green Bay's side, I made myself very clear I didn't like it, and that has nothing to do with is he a great player? Has he played terrific this year? He has, and he has been a great player. This team in Minnesota that he's playing on, I think, is top to bottom the best team in football right now. I think they defend the rush better than anybody. Have done that for 3 years. Massive offensive line. Sidney Rice is playing like Randy Moss, and then they added Percy Harvin, who's run 2 kickoffs back for touchdowns in the first 6 weeks. And it'll be interesting to see if Favre at age 40 can hold up. If he can hold up and stay healthy, there's no reason why this team shouldn't win a Super Bowl.
I agree with you 100%. Fran, I look forward to reading the book. Every Day is Game Day. Again, pick that up in your local bookstore. Fran, great talking to you, and I appreciate you coming on, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.